Hey there, my name is Mindy, or Mindy Chan on the internet, and with me today is Mr. Adam Behr. He is a special effects, puppeteer, makeup department guy, jack of all trades. We are extremely excited to talk to him today. He has done work on several movies and TV shows, including iRobot, Scary Movie 3, Very Merry Muppet Christmas, Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation, and many more. So, good afternoon or morning to Mr. Behr.
Good
It's
afternoon. Actually, it's still morning here.
yeah.
It's 11 a.m. How are you, Mindy?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good.
Thank you for joining us today and for keeping in constant contact with us. I know it was sort of a runaround about how we would conduct this interview, but it all worked out in the end. And
Absolutely.
I can't say thank you enough for your speedy replies either.
Oh, you're most welcome.
We have several questions for you today, including, but not only pertaining to, your work on Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation as the puppeteer for the characters Wick and Michelangelo. Okay, so let's ask the question I'm sure lots of people would like to know the answer to. Can anyone become a puppeteer, or does it take a special skill in order to make it work? And I take it there's no Jim Henson School of Muppets one can go to learn, can they?
Well, I think that the Jim Henson Company apparently do have very occasional workshops that they conduct. I don't know much about it. That people would have to contact them, but there are occasional workshops that they have, and I think that's one of the ways that they get their puppeteers. So there's that. There's also a Center for Puppetry Arts in Georgia. And then there's also a degree program, I know they used to have this, I'm not sure if it's in existence anymore, at the University of Connecticut. They have an MFA and a BFA in puppetry. Can anyone get into it? There's so many different angles to this business of puppetry for film and television. Some of the Muppet performers come to the business from more from acting and from voice work and improv and things like that, and some of them from suit work, doing full-size walk-around characters and that sort of thing. There's some puppeteers, in the creature effects world. That's the kind of work where we're puppeteering monsters on films and things like that, which I do a lot of. Sometimes people come to that from a background in designing and building animatronics, but also performance. It's sort of those applications are kind of a hybrid of acting skills and also an understanding of mechanical devices and also cinematography. There's a lot of filmmaking. There's a lot of I would say filmmaking knowledge that one really has to understand in order to make puppets work on film. So because you're performing to a monitor all the time, so you're really performing the puppet to the camera the same way that a lead actor has to understand how to play themselves to the camera.
So what was it like working on the set with Tim Allen and Leslie Nielsen on their respective movies, which was Santa Claus and Scary Movie? Were they just there to do their job and act, or were they interested in the stuff going around them and always getting in the way?
Well, Leslie Nielsen is always a lot of fun to work with, to have on the set. He's quite he's a bit of a prankster, and he's really, they both have, they're, obviously these are very big stars, and, they have, they bring a lot of their personality, they bring a lot of personality to the set. So I wouldn't say they get in the way, because what happens is when it's their scene, obviously the assistant directors lead them out to their place on the set and they do their scene, and then when they're finished, they go back to their trailer. So I'm just going to ignore that. That's one of the many calls that's probably going to be coming through while we're doing this interview. But it's always great, most of the time working with these big stars from Hollywood, because everything else on the movie has to be up to the same standard. You are making a big film that is going to be in theaters all around the country and around the world and on video. So it's very exciting. You're involved. Our department is often involved with doing performing a puppet character that is going to be very prominent on screen with these big stars. So it's really an honor for us, and it's very exciting most of the time when we're in that situation.
Now, when you have an actor in a suit and you're controlling the face or the arms or whatever you need to control from the control table offset, how difficult was it to get a vibe for one another's performance skills and work in tandem with each other to get the best possible reaction? For instance, working with the Michelangelo actor on the next Mutation.
Well, that's a very creative process. Working with the actor that I was working with on the next Mutation, who was inside the Michelangelo suit, his name was Jared Blankcard.
Mm-hmm.
And Jared and I got along very well, and we used to talk to each other constantly before the scene, because once they're in I can't remember if they could hear us because we had microphones and they have headsets inside the suits. But I can't remember. I don't think that they could talk back to us. So we would be talking to them constantly and guiding them throughout the performance. But Jared and I would go through a lot of choreography before every scene, and we would discuss, different points in the way it would play out, and we would discuss suggestions with each other and determine the choreography so that I could time the facial performance with some of the physical choreography that we discussed. And when you get those two elements working together fluidly, you get a beautiful performance, and it really brings the character to life. I think one of the challenges with that dynamic is to involve the director. It's quite challenging for directors because when it's a television program, the director's got a lot that he has to get through in a day, and he often sort of tailors the scene according to the way he's going to cut it together and so on and so forth. And then, myself or the puppeteers and the suit performers might plan some kind of elaborate choreography or something, and then when you actually get to the set, the director will go, no, don't turn away and point to the radio, just go straight through the door and leave. So you're always subject to having your ideas either included or not included, but to make the character come to life, you definitely have to have a synergy between the suit performer and the puppeteer. And during the performance as well, I will say things to Jared like, okay, because you see it happening in front of you on the monitor, and then you can also improvise. You'll say, okay, so-and-so standing behind you, why don't you accidentally bump into him like you got a fright, and I'll register that on your face. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it looks easier it sounds easier. Let's see. But then when you're talking about it, it just sounds difficult. InternetMovieDatabase.com doesn't say which character you performed on A Very Merry Muppet Christmas, but what was it like working on a Jim Henson production? And had you ever worked with Jim himself before he passed away?
No, I had not worked with Jim before he passed away. Unfortunately, I would have loved to. But I had worked on 2 movies with the Jim Henson Creature Shop, which is a different sort of branch of the Jim Henson organization, on Cats and Dogs and Snow Dogs, where I was puppeteering animatronic characters with the other Jim Henson puppeteers. So I had been introduced to the company and, to the way that they work and so forth. But working on the Muppet movie was, incredible because there's all these established characters, and in many cases, the puppeteers who have done them for a very long time. People like Steve Whitmire and Dave Goelz. Dave Goelz has been with the Muppets since the early days with Jim Henson, and Steve Whitmire as well. And Steve took over doing some of Jim Henson's characters like Kermit and so forth after Jim passed away. And Brian Henson was involved as well, and I got to meet Brian, and there were a group of us all working together on different scenes. So I think there were only one or two puppeteers on that particular film who were not part of the regular Jim Henson ensemble, and I believe I was one of them. And it was a tremendous experience, because it's a window into that world as a puppet performer that you don't come by very often. And I think a lot of puppeteers working in film and television today would love to work with the Jim Henson Company. So the fact that I've done 4 films with them now is just something that I regard as the sense of a great highlight in my career.
Well, that kind of leads into the next question, which was, how did you decide that being a puppeteer was what you wanted to do? Did you grow up watching Jim Henson's Muppets like Kermit and Miss Piggy and suddenly decide that way, or was there something else that inspired you?
Well, it's funny because, I grew up in South Africa, and we didn't have Jim Henson's Muppets on TV. So so I only started watching the, Sesame Street and the Muppets and things like that when I was an adult, which is kind of peculiar, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I wasn't familiar with the characters, and even when I started working on the Muppet movies, I was sort of terrified a lot of the time, because I honestly was not familiar with some of the characters. I knew of them, but I didn't really know the history, and even though I'd taken out all the videos and watched the Muppet films and so on, they weren't embedded in my psyche the same way that they would be for a child growing up in North America and watching TV here. So I've sort of come to it from a very peculiar point of view of not growing up with the Muppets and, coming to it that way. But I think what really got me interested was some of the other Jim Henson film projects, things like, The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, and, also the Star Wars movies, and, some of the same people, some of the people I've worked with were involved in the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and the Star Wars movies. David Barkley, for example, who I've worked with on a couple of films, who's a tremendous puppeteer, who's British, who now is based in Los Angeles, was involved in the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, and he was the head puppeteer of Jabba the Hutt in The Empire Strikes Back, and he did some of the Yoda puppeteering with Frank Oz, etc. So, there is an influence of that, but it was more, I would say it was more the films than the television project that sparked my interest in it.
I don't remember much about the new Addams Family, other than none of the original actors were in it. Was this movie a continuation of the original films, or something completely separate?
The new Addams Family was a television series, actually. And I believe, I stand to be corrected, but I believe that they got hold of some of the original scripts from the original Addams Family series, and just produced them with new actors, more for kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it was done by Saban and for the Fox Kids Network, I think, and very much geared for kids. It was, it was light and fun, and really, these are the people, Saban are the people that made Power Rangers and those kinds of shows. So it had a similar kind of, sort of a bit of a theatrical kind of a quality to it, theatrical as in the stage, not as in the cinema. But it was fun. There were a lot of neat puppet characters on that, and my shop, which I had back at the time, also built all the prosthetics for Thing and some of the other things that happened during the series.
I also saw you worked on Sliders as well.
Right.
Many fans consider seasons 1 and 2 to be the best of the bunch. And have you heard anything about the long-rumored Sliders movie? The 2 creators have mused about it, but so far nothing has been produced or said.
Mindy, I haven't, because after a short time, I think it was 1 or 2 seasons, Sliders took their production away from Canada, and I think they were doing it somewhere elsewhere other than Vancouver. So we sort of lost touch with the whole Sliders. And I mean, when I worked on it, there was sort of selected episodes that had our kind of special effects in it. So those were the only ones we did. It wasn't like I was on the entire series. But I haven't heard anything about a movie version, unfortunately.
Now this makes great timing because this movie is opening up this weekend. For Snakes on a Plane feature film, how long did it take for people to get used to the various ways to display the snakes in the movies? And were the CG snakes the toughest to get used to from an acting standpoint? And what was thrown in as a stand-in for the CG snake?
Well, the CG snakes were only obviously added in post-production, so nobody really would know what they look like until you see them on film.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were shooting the film, we definitely had to act around it, and there was some scenes where we used our actual animatronic snakes. The character shop in Los Angeles built really beautiful animatronic snakes that were highly realistic, and in many cases, we used them as stand-ins for the snakes, which were going to be added later in computer animation. And also there were some scenes where we performed the snakes, where we actually puppeteered them, and I think that in some cases those will be sort of act as guidelines for the animatronic snake, for the computer generated snakes. And yeah, it's always an interesting blend today. I think the best effects movies are a blend of live action animatronics and computer animation, and they both have their strengths and weaknesses. But when you use them together correctly, you're guaranteed the best possible result.
I actually don't want to go see that movie because I'm about to go on the plane for the first time, and I don't like snakes. So I'm not going to go catch it this weekend.
Oh, no. That's the idea, though. They want to scare people because of their natural fear of flying and snakes,
Just in case you ever see a snake on a plane.
That's right.
Kenan Thompson mentioned that he may not be completely afraid of snakes, but he doesn't care much for spiders. Did anybody play any practical jokes on the cast and crew members that were afraid of snakes on that film?
Well, you had to be very careful, and I'll tell you why, because we did have a lot of real snakes on the movie. So, one had to just be very sensitive. I know that some of the actors were a little bit afraid of snakes. I'm not going to mention any names, but some of the lead actors were afraid of snakes. So, we had to plan the scenes very, very carefully and use special effects where appropriate to complete the action. But I didn't see any practical jokes around the snakes. And I think it was just because, there were a lot of real snakes, including an 18-foot real python that took 6 people to lift, You
don't play with those sort of things.
No. And there were poisonous snakes as well that they shot in special enclosures. And, the animal wrangler, Jules Sylvester, is a tremendous animal choreographer and expert. And so, I think when you're messing around with live animals like that that potentially could be dangerous, you try and limit the practical jokes down to a minimum. There were a lot of practical jokes, I think, in other areas, but not with the snakes. Not that I saw much of, anyway.
Well, Sam Jackson seems to have a lot of suggestions for this movie, Snakes on a Plane, and producers wisely listened to most of them. They came around a bit later on some of his other suggestions. What's it like working with Sam J? Is he the ultimate movie fan living the dream of acting, or is he just so laid back he notices stuff other people may miss?
Well, from what I saw on the set, he is, he likes to do fun things here and there. He's definitely a very accessible person. You don't get the sense that he's standoffish or anything like that. I mean, he is a big star, and you don't kind of mess around too much. But I certainly noticed that most people were very comfortable around him on the set, and that he's very, very professional, and always, his performance is always great every take, and he's just a very compelling person to watch, and very kind of laid back and approachable in as a person. So as far as big movie stars go, and he certainly is one of the big movie stars of our time, or certainly one of the big names, I should say. He was someone who you always felt pleasant around on the set for sure, and there was a sense of professionalism that he brought to it, and a sense of fun as well. There was he's a very, from what I could see, I don't know him very well. I didn't really get to know him terribly well on the movie. We worked with quite a few of the people that are close to him and work with him on every movie because of what our jobs required. But, he seems like a very pleasant, very professional actor.
Now, you told me earlier that you have done some voiceovers. And what kind of works have you completed in the voiceover area? You want to tell us about that?
Sure. I've always wanted to do voiceovers. I do a little bit of voice acting, and everything from, I'll try and just think in the last few days. I just did the voice of an educational audio book called Harry Nibble, which is about a hamster for a company in Sweden. I did the voice for that. I just did a documentary for CNN where I think it's called In the Footsteps of Bin Laden. It's going to be quite a big documentary, and I do some of the Middle Eastern voices, the English language voices, because I do a lot of accent work. Things like the strategy guide for EverQuest 2 and the website for EverQuest 2 and the HD version. I do all the narration on that. I do a lot of narration, and I do a lot of, because my accent is so kind of mixed, a lot of big companies like to use my voice for corporate work where they're going to be talking to countries all over the world, the whole English language world, where they don't want the voice to be American, they don't want it to be British, but they want it to be something that everyone in the English-speaking world can kind of relate to equally. So I do a lot of that. Commercials, narration, and I work in all different accents. I work in American accents, South African, British, Australian. I just did some work in a Caribbean accent. I do a lot of work for companies in India and in other countries in an East Indian accent. So, that's sort of what I do, and I'm just starting to get into doing voice acting for animated characters. There's a few things like this Harry the Hamster, and there's a few websites that have got animated characters that are hosted by animated characters that I've voiced, and so forth. But I'm looking forward to getting involved in voice acting for animation very much more in my years to come.
Would you like to tell me how you got started in this?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in voice work, and in the last year, really, I decided to officially devote some time to doing voice work and to learning it. So I studied with the best teachers, really, in the business in Los Angeles. I studied with Nancy Wolfson of Brain Tracks Audio in Los Angeles, who's got to be one of the best coaches around. Kathy Weselak, who's a leading animation coach, and so forth. I studied with a lot of the top people, and then I got great demos produced, and eventually got around to getting great agents and so forth. And I have my own recording equipment and my own recording suite at home. So I have clients all over the world now that I do work with, and I'm still developing my career because it's parallel. I'm not stopping my puppetry career by any means. If anything, it's picking up. I'm just starting up Alien versus Predator 2, and I'm the lead Canadian puppeteer on that, working with Amalgamated Dynamics from Los Angeles, who've done all the Alien movies since Alien 3.
Okay, and one last question. Do you have a website where people can get information about you and your work? And I know there's an internet movie database, but do you have a personal website you'd like to share with us?
I have only a website right now for my voice work. If
Okay.
anyone's interested in checking out my voice work, my voice demos, it is at www.adambehr.com. And if anyone wants to find out about training, they can go to www.braintracks, audio, braintracksaudio.com. And that's for Nancy Wolfson, and you can study with her by phone. And I would highly recommend it because, I get a lot of voice work just because of the demos that she's produced for me, alone. So, yeah, if people are interested in training, that's a fantastic place to start.
Well, we'd like to extend our thanks again to you for joining us. And the fans really appreciate it when people in the entertainment field take the time to answer questions and allow them to get to know those entertainers better. And good luck with your future endeavors, Mr. Behr, and hope to talk with you again soon.
Thanks, Mindy. Where is this going to be on, just so I know?
ShreddersDojo.com.
Oh, okay.
That's where it's going to be.
Terrific.
Okay. Thank you so much again.
Thanks, Mindy. You have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.